All right. So with that, while that's happening, we are time for our first session. Kelly, are you ready?
I am ready. Awesome. Up and there's our amazing group of panelists. Thank you so much. So I want to hop right in because I got to tell you all this session that we're starting with. I don't think we could pick a better group of panelists to come in here. So I'm just going to quickly highlight who we have here, and then we're going to jump right in. So Andrea is a lead sales, pre-sales consultant at Morningstar. Andrea, good evening. Thank you so much for dialing in. Jen, we have Jen coming in on the East Coast here from Anaplan. Hey, Jen, thank you so much for joining. And Syra from ServiceNow, thank you all so much for being on here. And let me go on and talk a little bit about our agenda. So in today's session, my first year as a manager, we're going to do a little bit of a fireside chat, if you will. So we're going to talk through leading with authenticity, why delegation is key, as well as why you should just always be recruiting and networking. I'm hoping we might have a few extra minutes at the end for some audience questions. And if we do, please jump in and add them into the Q&A. If not, keep that conversation going in Slack. But with that being said, we are going to go ahead and jump over. So let's see. Thank you very much. We're going to turn that off. So Syra, I'm going to start with you first, and I'd like you to talk a little bit about this topic of leading with authenticity. I know this is a really important topic for you, so can you talk a little bit more about how that was a really key part of kind of your first year and early on in your career as a leader?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Kelly. So first off, so excited to be here. It's our first session today, so really kicking things off with a great conversation. For me, one thing that I think we really come to the table with as SCs is we really try to make sure that we know, everything that we're talking about, that we're super confident about our skill set, and that we bring all of that to the table. When you become a leader, what ends up happening is that you really need to own who you are, your vulnerabilities. You need to be, confident in being authentic and vulnerable in your true self. For me, coming in as a leader and owning that authenticity and vulnerability meant that I could really establish credibility with my team. One thing I spent a lot of time on is making sure that I spend, as much one-on-one time with the team to really dig deep on who I am as a leader, what I care about, and learning what the team cares about as well. So, whether it's kind of connecting on a personal level, sharing stories about my family and my life, leading with that authenticity and who I am, really means that the people that are part of my team can, in turn share who they are and what really motivates them. When your people know you, you know your people. That was a big takeaway for me in year one of becoming a leader. The other thing that I really care about and I reflected on as a first-time leader is that you're really the only one that's thinking strategically. So, be comfortable in owning that Zoom meeting where you don't have interaction from people, where people are maybe not chiming in and it's not necessarily a two-way conversation. And be confident in the fact that what you're bringing to the table is the strategy of looking at things from a high level, right? So, one thing I like to do a lot is work with my sales leader on making sure that I understand the business. And a lot of times when I come to the table with talking about the business and the plans going into 2021 and 2022, I noticed that I don't really necessarily get as much two-way conversation on that topic. In the beginning, it was super uncomfortable for me to kind of own the fact that, I'm having almost a one-sided conversation at times. But I had to really remind myself that I'm actually the only one that's thinking strategically on the team. And so that's super important. For me, I really picked this topic of leading with authenticity, Kelly, because, coming in, I think I tried to be somebody who I maybe wasn't. And no one really turned around and had the conversation with me around owning who you are at your core, because the more authentic and true you are to yourself, the more other people are going to believe in you. But then secondly, the more you're going to feel comfortable in owning your day to day. So, I can only be who I am, and I can only bring the best part of me to work. I think at the end of the day, we're all human beings. When you're an SC, you really focus on the connection that you make with your customers and with people internally as a technical SME. When you become a leader, you really have to own who you are as a human and who your team is as humans and your business partners, and connect with them on a deeper level. And again, the only way you can do that is really by being truly authentic and vulnerable. And so those were kind of my takeaways. I would say for people who are aspiring to be, who are SEs today, who are aspiring to move into a leadership role, you should really dig deep and think about what you care about as a person. There's kind of like this human psychology element to being a leader that no one can really prepare you for. But the more you dig deep within yourself, the easier it is for you to lead authentically and to really own who you are as a leader. There's all different types of leaders out there. Don't try to be something that you're not. So with that, Andrea is actually the second panelist for today. So Andrea, I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks a lot, Sarah. And I am glad to have the possibility to work together throughout this conference. That is my first year as a manager, and I started in 2020. So need I say more? A new team and team culture had to be built while working from home on top of assisting clients and sales. It's not only easy, but I'm still here, let me say. During the past year, I learned a lot of lessons, and I would like to share with you two main concepts. Lesson number one, don't be the star. I think it's beneficial for the team if the members get exposure and obtain personal recognition. Easy to say, extremely difficult in practice at the start. I started working at Morningstar 7 years ago. I joined the team after graduating. I was young, I was proactive, and I got things done. Life was certainly less stressful as I had plenty of responsibility, but at the end of the day, all my work had to go through my boss. They always had my back. It was a great start to career. I got on well with colleagues and felt confident in the work I was doing. I was focused on my own responsibility and selling myself as a star. However, I grew to realize that I had been missing out the bigger picture, and I was not putting the right attention to the work of my team. Everything changed when one day I had the opportunity for leading the team as PreSales consultant leader. And after 1 month, we received an RFP for a huge project. Just to give you a dimension of this project, it won the deal of the year in Morningstar. So in the past, I've been eager to take the spotlight and lead such an effort. But this time was different, as my role as a manager forced me to stay out of that spotlight and in turn delegate colleagues to lead. So else, and that's fine. I did well. The problem came later when I come across several invisible barriers that come with the responsibility of delegation. And I would like just to share with you 4 main challenges that I meet during my, let me say, this period. Point number 1, ego. I couldn't get the past idea that maybe I could execute the task better myself. The second challenge is time. I would convince myself that time spent explaining tasks was time lost performing tasks. Point number 3 was accountability. At the end of the day, the success and the failure fell on my lap. The weight of responsibility as a manager was difficult to shake. Point number 4 is authority-based tunnel vision. I had believed that delegation would reduce my ability to oversee and may create blind spots. As you can imagine, my pre-sales attitude was getting in the way of an effective managerial mindset. And I needed to find a way to break this habit. And I would like to share with you one lesson that I learned. You need to be more essential and less involved when you become a manager. That is the first lesson that I learned, but the second one is even more important. That is about the real meaning of delegation. Delegation is often misunderstood as the assigning of tasks to your team, full stop. Interpreting delegation like this misses a core benefit of this responsibility, as it doesn't allow your team to see the full picture and in turn miss out on their own growth in their positions. The real meaning of delegation is assigning responsibility for outcomes along with the authority to do what is needed to produce the desired results. It's not easy for the team. It won't be easy for you. It requires dedication and huge commitment. Pre-sales consultant can have because it's many ways goes against our mindset. We have often found ourselves in the position of having to fly solo and get it done on our own. Being in a position to ask others to complete tasks on our behalf takes a bit of rewiring. As a pre-sales consultant, you interact with many stakeholders, and often the success of a deal depends on you. It means that there will be a lot of pressure on the person you have delegated. And when there will be a difficult choice to make, the decision will ultimately fall on your lap. Sometimes you will be tempted by the ease of providing solution yourself, but opting for that may undercut the members of your team facing stakeholders, potentially reflecting poorly on the image of your team and barring your colleague from growth. If mistakes happen, you should follow up offline in person. This facilitates a means of communication that is personalized and more receptive to meaningful feedback. In my view, delegation extends well beyond the assignment of tasks. It should be defined by the responsibility of delegation that comes thereafter. Delegation is the guidance, facilitation, and fostering of success for your team. Thanks for your attention. I leave the ground to Jen for her speech.
Thank you, Andrea. That was really, really helpful. I learned a lot myself too. Again, really, really excited to be here today. So today I'm going to talk about the need or the learning of always needing to recruit and network. So the first thing I learned about becoming a manager is I didn't know that recruiting really played such a big role. I really thought it was a lot about, what Saira and Andrea talked about, focusing on managing an existing team and learning how to partner and support a sales team. However, the moment we had the opportunity to grow the team, I learned very quickly how crucial recruiting and interviewing is to successfully managing a region, especially the one that you're responsible for. Because not only are we responsible for retaining the team today, we're also responsible for growing a team that is scalable enough in the future as well. So this really requires a kind of understanding of your individual contributors and knowing your team very well, knowing their existing skill sets, experiences, so on and so forth, but also knowing the gaps and being able to target recruiting accordingly. So for example, this probably happens to all of us. There may be a change in a company's go-to-market, or we may have to focus on a different region, and then we have to adapt and grow our team accordingly. So recruiting kind of plays into that role, and again, being able to interview and find the right people is really important. So the next step of recruiting is then starting to interview. So I would say interviewing for a pre-sales role is probably one of the most challenging things I've ever done. I've been a manager in other roles before, but interviewing for a pre-sales consultant is really interesting because, as we all know, in pre-sales, everyone has different profiles, different experiences, and different skill sets that they can bring to the table. And it's really hard to tease out like the perfect profile or tease out if someone is the right fit within a couple of hours. So actually learning how to interview is something that I have learned and I'm actually continuing to learn about. So, learning about Saira and Andrea's experiences have been really, really helpful for me. Also, depending on the type of pre-sales you do, there may be different formats of how you need to interview for an SC. For our roles, there are more technical and more functional or sales oriented roles. So whether it be a straight interview, a case study, role play, presentation, technology experience, again, there's a lot of different formats that you kind of have to take into consideration. So one thing that I would recommend for SCs that want to become managers in the future is looking around at your team or even networking with others to see, what makes someone successful. And again, there is not one magic bullet. It is understanding that, again, there's a different set of skills and experiences that can make a pre-sales person successful. I'm going to actually direct a question to Andrea because Andrea, you have a really unique experience and you deal with multiple countries with different languages and cultures. How have you dealt with recruiting and interviewing kind of in your role?
Thanks, Jen. Well, in the last year as a manager, I deal with recruiting 4 times. One for France, one for Spain, one for Sweden, and one for Italy. So while the goal of recruiting is largely the same, you do observe difference in candidates from different countries. Particularly in the Southern European country, the people consider the loyalty and empathy with their colleague more important than their personal goal. So in this case, relation and group go for personal gain. Instead, this is a contrast to the Northern European country, where the personal goal and wishes are much more central, instead of wishing of the group. So you have also to take in consideration the different aspects and the cultural in the interview. So my suggestion is to structure the process in a way where you can identify the soft skills which can fit with the team, regardless the local culture. Anyway, I think that it's important for the growth to gain exposure to other countries, to understand how to deal with the different culture and local identity.
Thanks, Andrea. I know there's probably different challenges and lessons that you've learned kind of throughout your experience too. And Saira, you and I are really kind of in the Northeast, so different set of challenges, probably finding more diverse profiles and things are something that we're dealing with. So again, for each manager, regardless if you're handling multiple regions and cultures, it's just a challenging task that we all have to kind of look forward to. The last thing I want to talk about is, it kind of ties back to recruiting and interviewing, but it's always great to network with other leaders in the space. So again, this is why it's so great to have the PreSales Collective. I myself have been able to meet Saira and Andrea, but also network with other leaders in smaller and larger companies. And you just get the chance to learn, give each other feedback, receive coaching. And it really is to better yourself and to better the team. So just learning more, as we all know, that's kind of our core personalities in this role is just learning more and how to become better. So it's always great to kind of continue to network, and PreSales Collective offers that great opportunity. Another example is, as 2020 has come around, we've had a lot of focus on diversity and inclusion. So I know this is something that we're all trying to address as well. So it's extremely helpful to learn what others are doing to address and even kind of approach something like this. So with that being said, I'll pass it off to Kelly.
Wonderful, Jen. Thank you so much. I thought that I had a good list of actionable takeaways just from our couple of prep sessions, but I have to say, I learned a ton just from hearing this conversation. Thank you so much. A couple of things I want to just reiterate, and then we have some amazing questions that have come in I want to jump to here in a few minutes as well. But Saira, your conversation about vulnerability, I think that's huge, and at least for me and several other leaders I've spoken with, that's probably been the biggest adjustment. It's been almost emotional in this first year or so of being a leader. And in the beginning, I couldn't quite figure out why I was so tired, especially with COVID. We're not traveling anymore. I'm thinking, just sit at my desk all day. Why am I so exhausted? But putting yourself out there and then in turn having others open up to you as well, it's very emotional. It really does. It takes a lot of energy, a lot of effort. Honestly, you've got to be really brave with it as well to kind of open yourself up and expose yourself. But I do believe that the benefits far outweigh, you know, kind of putting yourself out there, because it really does develop a different level of trust with your folks, especially in this world that we're living in right now where we're all remote. I'm sure you all have folks on your team that you've never had a chance to meet because of COVID. So you've got to think about developing those relationships a little bit differently. And Andrea, from a delegation perspective, someone posted this in the Slack channel. I love it. To your point, you're going to go from hero as an individual contributor to zero as that leader. And there's so much around delegation that I think is challenging. Someone else, I think Emily posted it in there. It's not that you don't want to delegate, but it takes a lot of effort to delegate as well. Sometimes it's easier to say, I could just do this myself, or I could get it done faster, or I don't want to, put this burden on someone, however you look at it. But I think, Andrea, one of your points of it's not just about delegating a task. It should go beyond that assignment of tasks, but thinking about what those outcomes are and then giving the authority to that individual to be able to make those decisions to get to those results and kind of handing over your baby, if you will. It's hard to do, but again, I think the rewards are huge there. And Jen, I still can't believe how much time recruiting takes up in any given day or week. It's something, and several people in the Slack channel were saying you've got to be networking all the time. It's all about networking and building up that network. I feel like we could have a whole session just around, not only networking, but when you're actually doing those interviews, what are those questions that you can ask? How do you get that diverse pipeline? There is just so much here to unpack. So I want to jump into a couple of questions here because we've got a ton coming in from the group. So Syra, I want to direct this first question to you that came in. The question here is, how did you establish credibility with your team, especially if they were peers on your team? If you were promoted from that IC and now you're actually a leader to folks that just yesterday were your peers. Can you comment on that for us, Syra?
Yeah, it was, it's kind of interesting that you asked me this question because it was actually something that the leadership team actually asked me when I was interviewing for the role, which is, these are your peers today. How do you feel about establishing yourself as a leader? And it kind of goes back to the comment I made about being vulnerable and authentic. So, one transition that I had to endure was some of the folks on my team were peers. They also happened to be very good friends of mine, right? We spent, years traveling together. We know each other's personal lives. We know each other's spouses. And so a big challenge there was reestablishing my new brand as a leader and still a friend. And so one of the ways that I really did that was sharing what was going on inside of me. And that kind of goes back to Kelly to what we talked about, which is, that vulnerability of, I'm a first-time leader. I don't totally know everything that I'm doing. I don't know if I'm doing it right. Give me feedback on what you think. And I think the moment that you turn around and tell people who are, now a part of your team that you don't know, you don't have all the answers. A lot of them probably know a lot more than you do, and that you're looking for their insight on what you can do better and how you can help them. That is the biggest step in gaining credibility as a new leader, whether it's with peers or friends or, people that you're hiring new onto the team. And so really own that. One thing I'll say, and this was a personal experience of mine, was I was really fortunate to have worked for a manager who actually, moved up from SC manager to director now. And he made a comment to me, which I found amazing, because the first 6 months on the job, you have imposter syndrome, right? Everyone's heard of imposter syndrome. He actually said to me, moving into the director role, that he feels like he has imposter syndrome. And so, I almost felt that because he was sharing that with me, it's a chain reaction. I learned a lot in that moment when he opened up to me. And now I do the same with, new SCs that are joining my team, new folks that I'm mentoring to actually move into leadership. Just own it. Like, again, we're all humans. Just own it, dig deep. I saw that there was a question around discovering your most authentic self. The best way to do that is to really think about what you care about, what you spend your time on, what you care about in human and in personal relationships, and bring all of that to work, right? It's a new way of working in technology, and with the remote workforce, the lines between work and personal are becoming more and more blurred. Don't be afraid to bring that personal side of you and that authentic side of you to work and share it with people who you work with.
I'll just kind of jump in, Sarah. You made a really good point. And I feel like we all have different styles and we all have different personalities, kind of going back to we can all contribute in different ways. So just because someone's management style works for them may not necessarily work for you. So it's kind of like how personalities are so different. I completely agree with you. It is kind of like finding what works for you. And maybe it's understanding your strengths and weaknesses and being vulnerable, right, with your team about them.
And if I can add something, just
Mm-hmm.
the best way, in my opinion, is to be fair and coherent with your team. At the end of the day, leadership is not a job title that you gain with an application. It is something that you are going, let me say, to gain together with the respect of your team.
Bingo. Absolutely. I think, James, I think we need to make a note that we're going to have a full day session about this topic, because this is huge. And I think that, Sarah, you mentioned it earlier, we have visions of what leaders are, right? And then all of a sudden you are a leader. You've still got to be authentic to yourself and be true to yourself. And I think that's huge. I could talk about this all day. I love it. Jen, I think you really hit a key topic as well, because I'm seeing a bunch of questions come in around this. So I want to first start with you, but would love to hear from everyone. You talked a little bit about getting that diverse pipeline. So there's a series of questions that are coming in. So I want to hear you talk about any tips that you might have on trying to find those more diverse candidates and fill that more, if you're looking at a particular candidate, getting a variety of folks that you're looking at within that pool. Can you speak a little bit on that, Jen? And I'd love to hear from everyone else as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in the old days, we always used to reach out to our own networks. And as we all know, this community is very small. So you tend to get kind of the same type of profile within the same type of community. The first step was actually really reaching out to PreSales community, the PreSales Collective community, to post a job posting, because again, there's a range of different software companies that are all contributing to this community. So actually posting to the PreSales job board was something where it was really helpful, and we got a really diverse set of experiences. The one thing that we also learned kind of through our process is not looking for a very specific background. If you kind of narrow it down too far, again, you get the same type of candidates. So, it's kind of being open to different experiences, different skill sets. That kind of opens up a little bit too. And
Such a huge point.
Yeah, definitely. And another great thing to keep in mind is definitely be aligned with your HR, right? They're kind of helping lead that recruiting process. So, what we've always said is, focus on hiring and looking for diverse candidates. And let's not also only focus on the candidates themselves. Let's make sure the panel, as we're interviewing, that we're diverse as well. So it's kind of looking at both sides and making sure that not only are our candidates diverse, but we're also communicating that we're a diverse culture as well.
One comment I'd like to add to that, and it's a little bit more tactical. Dibs recruiting is a huge focus for a lot of tech companies right now in our space. One thing I found interesting, and this has more to do with gender, which is just one component of diversity. Obviously, diversity comes in many forms. With gender, what I found eye-opening is that women only apply to a specific role when they read the job rec and they feel that they meet 100% of the requirements on the job rec. And men apply to that same role when they feel they meet 60% of the requirements on the job rec. So as hiring managers, hopefully we actually have influence on deciding what goes into the rec that gets posted. I mean, I know a lot of times when I've read some of the stock recs that get posted, they have way too specific of asks for an SC joining the organization. And I can easily go through there and say, hey, I don't think we really need all these. I really need somebody who has a growth mindset and who has the base capabilities to come in and be successful within 3 to 6 months as a reasonable time frame. So make sure just tactically that you're spending that time on that job rec so that you're getting that pool of diverse candidates applying in the first place. And Jen, I love what you said about making sure that the interview panel is also diverse. As a DIBS candidate applying to a company, if they're bringing you in as, a DIBS candidate into the pipeline, and then you see on the panel that there's no diversity, it's not a good look. And I think that the more awareness we bring to this, I think the better the outcome is going to be in terms of hiring more folks with diverse backgrounds and profiles.
Yeah, spot on. I can't believe we're already at time, but I have to do a shout out. There's a lot going on with PreSales Collective right now, specifically around things such as women in solution excellence. We've got all sorts of different programs. I highly recommend reaching out. I think I tell the story all the time, Syra, to that point. My interview, when I was interviewing at DocuSign, my manager at the time said, how did you even get to the interview? I really struggle with trying to find women in general. And this is going back several years. I think we've done a lot to make that change, but that's huge. And I saw Courtney just posted that same stat in the Slack, Syra, that you mentioned. So I can't think of a better way to end this session. So huge thanks to the three of you. What a way to kick off today's session. I have goosebumps. I'm so inspired. I can't thank you all enough.